Well, historically, the Iowa caucus has not been a huge predictor of what happens in New Hampshire. New Hampshire's kind of revel in the fact that they often choose a different winner than Iowa does. There are some big differences in terms of the demographics. There's obviously a big difference between how you run a caucus and how you run a primary. That said, I think it can have an impact on the candidates and the campaigns themselves. You win coming out of Iowa, you're going to have some momentum, you're going to have some excitement, and you hope that that will spill over to supporters on the ground in New Hampshire. It's not always the case, but sometimes you do see that. I think it's a close race. You have a lot of candidates competing in the same space. It shows that there's sort of no clear divisions in terms of where the voters are making their choices. That Republican race in Iowa, you basically had 3 candidates all within a couple points of each other in the 20s. That's a pretty significant split. And on the Democratic side, you had that dead heat between Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders. So it just shows that you have 2 very competitive races, and I expect them to be competitive in New Hampshire, particularly on the Republican side. The demographics of the caucus goers on the Republican side in Iowa compared to the demographics of the people competing in the people voting in the New Hampshire primary are very different. Republican caucus in Iowa is heavily evangelical. It's socially and religiously conservative. New Hampshire Republican Party, much fiscally conservative, somewhat libertarian. And so you have a number of candidates here in New Hampshire, the governors, as we like to call them, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, and John Kasich, who just don't compete well in Iowa. Conversely, the candidates who did well in Iowa, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump to some extent, they come here because of the slightly different voter demographic, particularly I think for Ted Cruz. We've seen Iowa winners going back to Mike Huckabee in 2008 or Rick Santorum in 2012. They come here, and New Hampshire's just not an evangelical state. It's not a religious state. It's more libertarian among Republicans, and they kind of stumble. So even though Ted Cruz comes here as the victor, he's got a lot of challenges in terms of getting some of those voters away from Trump and Rubio and then the 3 governors.